Let us then again begin by a little prayer here. This is the act of love. Lord God, I love you above all things, and I love my neighbor for your sake, because you are the highest, infinite, and perfect good, worthy of all my love. In this love, I intend to live and die. Amen.
Amen.
And the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, as Monsignor said, we come to the last day, the final kind of moment in this trio of virtues, faith, hope, and love. Again, what I'd like to do is word association. I find that's very helpful to get ideas bubbling up in people. So just take a moment. When you hear the word love, I want you to kind of say what comes into your mind. Think of what comes into your mind. And don't think in terms of that overly saccharine movie, The Love Story. Love means never having to say you're sorry. Well, forgive me. Or as a professor of mine said, sometimes in life, as in tennis, love means nothing. So take a moment, get an idea into your head, and then we'll do the word association on love. Love.
Unconditional. That's a new word that.
Okay, ready? Unconditional.
Unconditional. Mother.
Compassion.
Oh, now realize I am not instant transliteration here. So someone said mother,
Yes.
and I'm going to say children.
Action.
Action.
Mutual.
Mutual.
Acceptance.
Acceptance.
Forgiveness.
Sacrifice.
Share.
Oh, what's Okay, there was someone over here. Devotion.
Infinite.
Forgiving.
I think forgiveness is up there. Patient. I think we're going to go into St. Paul's list.
Marriage.
Eternal. Let's see, okay.
I heard,
How about unselfish?
Unselfish.
I heard merciful somewhere out there.
Generous. Compromising.
What was that last one?
Compromising.
Compromising.
God.
Okay, anything else? Yes.
The rosary?
The
rosary.
The rosary. The mysteries and reflecting on it, or just the rosary, wearing the rosary like Madonna? No. Anything else?
Family.
Presence. ENCE or ENTS?
Yes.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
All right. Okay, maybe one or two more.
Kind.
Kind.
Caring.
Caring. Okay, we'll call it quits there. Okay. It's good. I think today you all had a lot more words coming forth for the virtue of love, which is a wonderful thing. When we talk about love, the Latin word, love has many meanings, you know. We can kind of misunderstand it. And in the New Testament, there are various Greek words that are used. But the kind of love that is this virtue, this theological virtue of love, is caritas, the word caritas, which we translate as charity, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. So as a virtue, this virtue of love, this caritas, is our means. It's the way in which we love God above all. The virtue of love is how we are able to see that God is the proper object of all our love, the fullness of what our lives mean. To love God above all things just because of who God is, of who God is. You know, our problem sometimes is we create an image of God that looks a lot like ourselves. And realizing to love God is to love God, is who God is. We're the creatures. God is the creator. And the great condemnation always in the Old Testament was when what? We made graven images, idolatry, that we tried to make God into something that's our doing, rather than loving God as God is. And that encounter with love, that sense of a love that knows the truth, the ultimate truth, is the great blessing. So I want you to pay attention to this very simple fact. Jesus makes love the new command. We can't stress enough, and His Holiness Pope Francis's apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love, treats in an incredibly beautiful way how the family is that place where love is made manifest. The importance of how we show and manifest that love. I think our problem is in our culture and society, we throw the word love around and we don't know what it means. I love chocolate ice cream, or I love vanilla ice cream. It's not that. Jesus has given to us a commandment, and that commandment is to love. Now, you all probably remember in the scriptures, the New Testament, and particularly in Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 to 40, when the scribes and Pharisees are trying to trick Jesus up. One of the realities for the Jewish people, especially given the book of Deuteronomy, were a whole series of different kinds of laws that the Jews had to follow and obey. And so to trip Jesus, they ask him, what's the most important law? You remember that story? Rabbi, what is the most important law? It's important for us to appreciate when they ask, teacher, what is the greatest commandment? That this is where Jesus kind of really reveals what God's doing in our world. It isn't about adhering to this whole list of things. It's about how we are in relationship. How we are in relationship. Which for us as Christians is a very important reality, because the very nature of God is relationship. A trinity of persons, a oneness of substance. So when we appreciate that community which is God, that sense of relationship, for us, our participation in God is participation in the relationship which makes God God. So they ask him, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. This commandment that Jesus offers, this sense then of what we're called to be, always has to reach its fullness. Our faith and our hope reach its fullness in the reality of love. It's kind of like having a sideshow going on. So. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Or the lady behind the
Did you
curtain.
ever watch the I Love Lucy show when
Oh,
Ethel
constantly.
is, performing and they're behind her doing all sorts of stuff?
Oh, okay. Well,
We are making room
no,
for
it's
the
wonderful.
next
It's
generation of our
wonderful.
church.
There are like 3 or 4 seats over here too, so if
Well,
people are looking for spots, please. I'm happy with this. This is absolutely great. But nevertheless, I want to repeat what Jesus said so I have your undivided attention. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. That's the fullness of who we are. Our hearts, our minds. Remember I talked the other day about how we're made as human beings? The way in which we understand and process our world to know and to love. Our wonderful gold star, holy card, Baltimore Catechism. The reality too, it's the very soul of who we are. That sense of the depth of who we are as a human being. Now there's another book I have out, which again, this is just shameless commercialization here. But it's called The Soul-Centered Life. The Soul-Centered Life. The soul is the part of who we are that integrates, that centers who and what we are as human beings. So it's really important when the church talks about the soul, it isn't Casper the Friendly Ghost flying around out there. It's something so integral, so core, that makes you you. It's the principle of who you are. So the life of the soul is an important dimension for us as Christians to tend and care to. I think unfortunately people dismiss it. They just think, oh, it's kind of old folly doll. But the soul is what makes you you. The truth of who you are. And you can see that when you really touch another person's soul. So this other book, The Soul-Centered Life, is really helping us to appreciate the importance of the soul, especially in understanding who we are as God's creatures. But love the Lord your God with all your mind, with all your heart, and with all your soul. This is the first and the greatest commandment. Now notice what Jesus does. He doesn't stop there. It's not just, oh yay, me and God. Yay, God. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now I think in this day and age, when we find there is such division, that command has all the more meaning. It is the core of Jesus' preaching, to love God and to love our neighbor. We as Christians, regardless of a person's political ideology, regardless of anything about who they are called to love one another. That's the commandment that Jesus has given to us. And it captures up everything of who and what we are. So you can appreciate that this theological virtue, remember these theological virtues are the virtues that help us share, participate in divine life, in the life of the Trinity. So love is one of those dimensions of our humanity where we find ourselves the closest to God. That is why the church defends and tries to help people understand more fully what true love is. Love can be exploited, we know that. But true love, that love which is the core of God's care for us, which embodies all of these dimensions and aspects, is the very thing that helps us in faith and hope to enter fully into the relationship of the mystery of God. Now I want to share with you a 20th century theologian. I think you all may know of her. She's really very, very good. 20th century theologian. Her name is Tina Turner. And she says, or actually she sings, but I won't inflict that on you. What's love got to do with it? Got to do with it. What's love but a second-hand emotion? What's love got to do with it? Got to do with it? Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? Even though we may think of Tina Turner as just a musician, a performer, the lyrics of many songs certainly have an impact in our lives. And it is to appreciate that that perhaps is our culture's main question. What does love have to do with it? In dating, is it true love? In a sense of being family, how do we manifest that love for one another? What has love got to do with reconciling with a neighbor that you've had a kind of tiff with, or a feud over years? What's love got to do with it? This is the question then for us, that as the virtue of love, we realize it has everything to do with life. No matter what the it is, love's got to do with it. Got to do with it, okay? The other thing that is so true, and it's captured in this, there's a vulnerability to loving. There's a willingness to risk in loving. A person who isn't able to love never takes a risk. That isolation, that sense of safety, that security is a control mechanism. Love is a roller coaster ride. Love has its ups and downs. Love has its challenges. And I think for us to appreciate that the very power of divine love is manifested even in the brokenness of our hearts. In the brokenness of our hearts. You know, it was Leo the 13th who really inaugurated a strong devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Sacred Heart of Mary. That sense then of the heart of a person, our opportunity to reflect and realize all that goes on in our heart, all that goes on in our heart. Well, the heart is where we desire, our will, what we're drawn to. It is a sense of the good and of knowing the good and discovering the good. So, theologian Tina Turner, you hit onto something right. The issue for us is not the question she's asking, but the answer that Christ gives to us. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. And love your neighbor as yourself. That sense then of love in our lives is critical. Do any of you listen to country music on the radio? Fess up, nobody's going to judge you harshly. Come on. Yes. I will confess, I like listening to country music. Part of the reason that I like listening to country music is that most of the songs are ballads. They're poetic ballads. They tell a story. They tell a story. So almost all of the country songs are about love, or the loss of love, or your cheating heart. There's one that I like out now. Whose bed have your boots been under? It's amazing how poets can capture so much of what love is about. Love is about. So here I'm going to turn it over to your audience participation. You can do this where you get your whole table to share with it on you, or you can do just part of your little grouping of your table. But what I would like you to do is think of a love song as your table or as a small grouping, and why this love song says something to you. It can be either in terms of the positive things about love or the challenges and the difficulties of love. So this is a moment for you to discover contemporary theologians who have written songs about love It'll be very interesting for us to hear what are on the sound waves of our society about love. Okay? So I'm going to give you about 5-10 minutes to come up with this. Do you need to use your smartphones and look up lyrics? Do that. Oh, by the way, for the brave souls among you, I will ask you to sing this
Crazy.
I love crazy.
All my life has been a series of doors in my face, and then suddenly I bump into you.
I was thinking the same thing. Because I've been searching my whole life to find my own place. And maybe it's the party talking or the chocolate fondue.
All right. Again, I mean, it's certainly true. That reality of love that opens possibilities and horizons. Anyone else? Another song here? Yes.
Open to win.
Sing loudly.
Telling those sweet lies and losing again. I was looking for love in all the wrong places.
All ready? You're gonna sing this? What is the song?
Well, one I sang for a wedding one time was "Old Flames Can't Hold a Candle to You." Old flames can't hold a candle to you.
Oh, I'll belt it out from right here.
Okay.
And some people are gonna know this line. Love is a many slender thing.
And she got in this habit as she was aging and all, to just when you say, "Okay, Mom, I love you, goodbye," she goes, "I love you a bushel and a peck." You know that song. I'll tell you, this is a funny thing, how even beyond the grave, people can kind of talk to you or be present to you. So when I moved from Manhattan, the first day of July, I was in the house, I had said a mass in the morning, it was a Sunday morning, that Sunday, and I said, so July 2nd, I think, said a mass, crying, because she passed away in June. And I was watching television, and wouldn't you believe it or not, about 4 or 5 times, State Farm aired a commercial that just kept coming up, and it's, I love you, a bushel and a peck, and a hug around the neck. So all of these songs about love and the importance of how they stay with us. So I think for us then, this is just a kind of fun way. Now, Monsignor said he went to the nursing home, but this felt like the nursing home. moving on before I get into trouble. That reality of love, and especially how we're able to sing about it, and notice that a lot of those lyrics touch our souls, touch the kind of core of who we are. So for us then to think about what love is and what love has to do with our lives, I want to share with you something that I love about St. Thomas Aquinas, and any chance I have to tell people what Thomas says about it, I share. I share it with them because it's so good. Thomas talks about love and he says, you and I as human beings, we love because we perceive the good in another or in a thing. We see the good that we like in chocolate, or we see the good in another person. And so we are drawn to that good. Now, very often, especially in counseling or spiritual direction, love kind of gets a little tough at times because we realize people aren't perfect. People aren't perfect. But the good of a person doesn't lie in their perfection. I want to say that again. The good of a person doesn't lie in their perfection. Sometimes the people that we love the most are the ones that we can see in their struggle, in their challenges, in their difficulties, in their flaws and in their imperfections. How they struggle, how they move on, how they meet some of these challenges as best they can. And that's what we love about them. The good that is made manifest even in their brokenness, even in their brokenness. So it certainly is true. And I'll say this to young couples when I'm on campus and that, you're not going to fall in love with somebody because they're perfect. You're going to fall in love with somebody because you can see the good in who they are. The good in who they are. Very often, what is it? It's the first fight of a couple where they kind of deal with the fact that it isn't all sunshine and lollipops, but that love endures beyond even these hiccups, these kind of bumps in the road type of thing. So that's an important thing about human love. It's a matter of the heart, of the will. And the will, as we said yesterday, is ordered to the good. So when you and I love something or someone, or we feel that we love someone or something, always ask yourself, what is the good? What is the good? What is the good? Now I want to share with you advice that I was given by another Dominican when I was a young deacon and began preaching. He said this to me: before you get up to preach, ask yourself one question. Do I love these people? Do I love these people? And he said, if you answer yes, then everything will be fine. But he said, if you answer no, you ought not to preach. There's truth in that. There's truth in that. So this reality of what love enables us to kind of behold and see the good in one another. Now Thomas goes on because I think this is the richest of the points. Thomas goes on and says, but God doesn't love like that. God doesn't love like that. God doesn't love us because we're good. That would make God's love dependent on us and our goodness. What Thomas says is God's love makes us good. God's love makes you good. No matter the struggles, no matter the difficulties, no matter how much you feel you're worthless or you're not any good, it is God's love that makes you good in itself. Not perfect, but good in yourself. So for us to be able to kind of appreciate that this gift of love is a way in which all of our human relationships and those people and things that we do love genuinely are tuning us into what goodness is. But as we become aware of what that goodness is, we start to see even the goodness in our own hearts. And we realize that's been placed there by God. That's been placed there by God. So all of these struggles, all of these challenges are eager part of who we are. And why it's so important for us as Catholics to really recognize that this virtue of love needs to be talked about, needs to be sung, needs to be shared. It's interesting that in the early church, way in which the faith was kind of shared was through Latin chants, little ditties. Sometimes the melodies were the same as sort of like sailor songs, the kind of jingo that would go back and forth. But one sign that I'm sure you all know of is drawn from words that echoed through the early church. Ubi caritas et amor, Deus ibi est, Deus ibi est. Where charity and love are, there God's own self is present. Now, oftentimes at the Easter, at Holy Thursday, when we process the Blessed Sacrament for reposition, one of the songs that many parishioners will sing in that procession is that song. I'm banking on some of you may know this, so I want us to sing not country, not show tunes. I want us to sing what really is the core of a Christian song in our hearts. So, Ubi caritas. Wait, no.
Ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est. Ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est. Ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est. Ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est.
Excellent. Now the brothers at Taze may recognize that or not, we won't. But that song of where charity and love are, God's own self is present. Think of that. The power of that. And Jesus' message to us, what Jesus' revelation to all of us is that we are loved, we are the beloved. And we manifest that how? In a relationship of love with the God who knows us. And so as we, for our part, come to know who and what God is, our lives take on their truest form. Love enables us to let go of the false, but isn't ourselves. Now this is going to be a little, tongue-in-cheek and no pun intended. But I have couples kind of tell me in their marriage that they knew everything was going to be all right the first time they did you know what in the bed. Not you know what, but suddenly all their barriers are down. Again, I think it's important for us to appreciate that you love a person not because they're perfect. Look around. But there's something truly genuine, that sense of integrity of who the person is, with their challenges and their flaws. So I want you to listen. There are 9 passages that I found from the New Testament that really underscore the very fact that love is core to being a Christian. So in the first epistle of John, chapter 3, verse 11, the message you heard from the very beginning is this: we must love one another. Boom. Straightforward. The very first message that was preached to anybody. Love one another. Love one another. In John's Gospel, chapter 13, verse 34, And now I give you a new commandment. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. Jesus' command to the disciples and to us is this call to love. In 1 Peter, the epistle of 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8, he says this: above everything, love one another earnestly, because love covers over many sins. Love is able to tolerate our flaws, our imperfections. Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 13, verse 8. Be under obligation to no one. The only obligation you have is to love one another. Whoever does this has obeyed the law. Love one another. Again, 1 John, the epistle of John, chapter 3, verse 18. My children, our love should not be just words and talk. It must be true love, which shows itself in action. That, in terms of the early Christian community, I think I shared this either in the evening but one of the most common phrases in the Acts of the Apostles about the Christians weren't their doctrine of the Trinity is really weird, or was this, see how they love one another. See how they love one another. Again in 1 John chapter 4, verses 12 to 13. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in union with us, and his love is made perfect in us. We are sure that we live in union with God and that he lives in union with us because he has given us the Spirit. You can see how for the early church, this reality of love, and for us, maybe because our society's taken it so much for granted that it is like tennis, where it means nothing. This is something that we as Christians ought to awaken to and realize. The Pope's apostolic exhortation is really nothing more than echoing what the early church said about Jesus' commands. 1 Corinthians, St. Paul, chapter 16, verse 14. Do all your work in love. Do all your work in love. And Ephesians chapter 4, verses 2 to 3. Be always humble, gentle, and patient. Show your love by being tolerant with one another. Do your best to preserve the unity which the Spirit gives by means of the peace that binds you together. Again, you can appreciate for the early church, there are struggles and conflicts, but we work towards building a unity, manifesting that love. And 1 Peter, the last one, chapter 3, verses 8 to 9, 1 Peter. To conclude, you must all have the same attitude and the same feelings. Love one another and be kind and humble with one another. Do not pay back evil with evil or cursing with cursing. Instead, pay back with a blessing. Because a blessing is what God promised to give you when he called you. I think for our society and culture, we as Christians need to help echo the law of love and make that manifest in our world. According to the New Catechism of the Catholic Church, there's this wonderful line: love animates the moral life. Love is what makes our life and living with one another soulful, animated, anima, animated. There is a freedom of being the children of God that has been given to us. It is the fruit of love or charity are these three things: joy, peace, and mercy. Joy, peace, and mercy. How many of our homes, how many of our neighborhoods, how many of our communities need to be loved? To be loved. And how we are called as Christians, as the command, to love one another. In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1829, it gives a number of points about what love is, or charity. Charity, it says, demands beneficence and caring for one another. Love demands our caring for one another. Love is benevolent. It wills the good of others. It fosters reciprocity. There is a change. You see mutual up there. Love remains disinterested and generous. It isn't selfish, but generous. And finally, it is friendship and communion. Friendship and communion. We can certainly see and appreciate that in these theological virtues that we've been reflecting on these last 3 days, that these are the ways, faith, hope, and love, of being able to draw into the divine life, the life of God. So for us then as a people of faith, it is that sense of coming to know God in a way different than scientifically. It's more than just an opinion. It's built on the testimony and witness of those who believe. The hope that is given to us is always for a good. We're ordered to the good which is God. This is why hope and love are connected. The greater hope we have, we're able to kind of see the good that we love in others. So then, again, to end simply with St. Paul. In the end, there are 3 things that last. Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love.
I've been here in the parish for a long time, as some of you know, since I was 7 years old. And I've been to lots of parish missions. And I have to honestly say that this one really rocked the house.
What a way to go. So thank you all very, very much, and I really appreciate it. And by the way, those books are We Walk by Faith. You can kind of do that. A Soul-Centered Life. You can Google that and find that. I am a shameless salesman. God bless you all.